My philosophy on AI has been around enable and protect. That's sort of the terminology that we use here. And by that, I mean, we should lead with enablement because the promise and the benefit of this is just immense for pretty much any company, right? We're no exception there. And, but then we back that up with the guardrails and the policies and so forth.
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Tim Langley-Hawthorne. Tim is the Chief Information Officer of Hertz, one of the world's largest mobility companies that includes Dollar and Thrifty in addition to the Hertz brand and earns roughly $9 billion in annual revenue. Tim's been in his role for nearly 3.5 years, and during that time has ushered in a modernization program for the company, has driven the migration to a product operating model, and has helped institutionalize artificial intelligence for the company. I look forward to covering each of these topics and more through this conversation. Tim, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Peter, really great to be here with you.
Thank you so much. Well, let's peel back the onion a little bit further than I just did as to Hertz's business. I imagine a lot of people who are listening to or watching this interview will have experience with Hertz, as I certainly have. But I know there's more than meets the eye. Talk a little bit more about the business that you're in, if you would.
Well, sure. Well, first, thank you for your business with us over the years. We're the most recognized car rental brand in the world. As you mentioned at the start, we reported around $9 billion of revenue for 24. We are the definition of an asset-heavy business. We operate a fleet of around 560,000 vehicles globally. And we operate from a little over 11,000 locations in about 160 countries. We have 26,000 employees that support our customers every day. And we go to market through the Hertz brand, as you mentioned. That's our premium brand that is extremely well known and recognized. And then we have two value brands. We operate Thrifty and Dollar, and they are our value brands, often targeted towards leisure customers. And then we also offer a fully digital, touchless car sharing service in a couple of countries around the world. We operate in Europe under the Hertz 24/7 brand, and in Australia, my home country, in New Zealand, through the FlexiCar brand. So that's really the portfolio of the company. As I say, we are the definition of an asset-heavy business for sure.
Indeed, that makes sense, and certainly appreciate that overview. While we're setting the table here for our conversation, let's talk a bit more about your role as Chief Information Officer. I mentioned you're just shy of 3.5 years in role. Talk a bit about what's within your purview, if you would.
Sure. I joined the company in late 21, and that was as the company was emerging from the COVID period, which was a tough period for companies in the travel and transportation industry. And look, I was drawn here to Hertz by this challenge to reboot the technology direction for the company to better serve our customers and our employees, and have worked very closely with our Chief Product Development Officer. He joined the company a little after 6 months after I joined, and we've really brought this updated view of how do you use technology, how do you deploy it, how do you go to market with it, and really have sort of brought a product mindset to an organization that I think was, a very has brought a lot of good technology to the industry, but maybe was missing a little bit of that product mindset. So that's sort of what attracted me here. So I'm responsible for global technology here at the company, and as I say, work very closely with all the different business stakeholders across the different company to deploy technology that enables the business.
In referencing your Chief Product Development Officer, Ned Ryan, talk a little bit more about that product mindset you talked about. I assume you're talking about on your team, in addition to his, of course, in title, has a very direct connection to product. Talk about the implications to an organization like yours, if you would, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. And we look at product really in two areas. We have what we call consumer product, and then fleet products, right? And those are really the two largest consumers of technology. So consumer product are the things that you would typically experience as a customer of ours. So, how do you interact with us during the shopping and booking flow. How do you interact with us while you're on rent? How do you interact with us after you return the car? Those are all consumer-related products, obviously enabled by tech. And Ned and his team lead the strategy there. The fleet product, which are how do we manage that fleet of more than 500,000 vehicles? In partnership with Ned Ryan, our Chief Product Development Officer, Ned leads consumer product here. So if you think of consumer product in our industry, these are the software products that you interact with as a customer, whether it's shopping and booking, whether you're renting the car, picking up the car, whether you have problems while you're on rent, and then post-rent if you have any questions. So that's all consumer product. And the other side of the equation is fleet product, which is all of the software products associated with the management of that fleet of more than 500,000 vehicles, which is led through my organization. And those things are focused around damage, maintenance, vehicle movement, vehicle availability, and all of those types of aspects. But we've brought that mindset, in unison across both consumer and fleet. And I think it's been very powerful, right? Rather than just looking at things as, deploying a platform or going live with something, it's like, what are we really doing it for? Do the people that are using the software products that we're deploying love it? What more do they need from it, right? So it's really we had the start of that here when I joined, but we've really put that on steroids over the last 3 years.
And talk a bit about how that was brought to life in an organization like yours, Tim. I would imagine the different mindset, as you called out. Also, I would imagine new skill sets that are necessary for some and new levels of collaboration that needed to be inculcated in the organization as well. Can you talk a bit about some of the mechanics associated with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I say, we had the starting of a product organization when I got here, so we weren't starting from ground zero. But we've brought in a lot of the product managers that are now here in the organization. We've brought them in from outside. There's certainly, I think that's something that if you really want to reboot that culture and that mindset, just reskilling, retraining, etc. internally just isn't going to get you there fast enough. You've got to bring people in from the outside. So we've brought in people from Amazon, from Rivian, from like big tech companies that have got a very, very mature product operating model. So I'd say that was one of the very mechanical things, is we made a very conscious decision to bring in new talent in that area. The other thing that we had to do was when I got here, we were heavily outsourced, heavily dependent on third parties to really do almost everything. And while, I'm a big believer in partnership, and we certainly continue to use a lot of partners, we felt that we needed to bring back a lot of those skills. So we brought some of the folks that were working for these third parties came back to us as Hertz employees, but we also purposely went out and have hired engineers, again, from companies with really strong product engineering mindsets and backgrounds to come in and build this next generation of fleet products and consumer products. So again, we've also reskilled internally in that area, but to really accelerate it, we found you've got to bring in additional new talent to blend in with the talent that's here. And I've got people on my team that have been with the company 30 or 40 years. I mean, it amazes me every day, the depth of talent and the knowledge of the industry that we have here. And when you infuse that sort of experience and that sort of history and knowledge with people that are coming from, really cutting product engineering backgrounds, it's really quite powerful.
Remarkable. I mentioned at the outset also that another priority for you and the team has been a modernization program. And I would love to have you define that, as well as to talk about how you've thought about revealing that, the steps of the process to help the organization modernize.
Sure. I look at, modernization has to have a reason and a purpose, right? There's no point just deploying technology for technology's sake. I have a saying that my team knows, which is we're not here to do science projects and science experiments and math projects, right? We innovate, don't get me wrong, but we're here to actually drive value for the business. So we've approached modernization, what I call from the bottoms up, or the inside, but also from the outside in. The bottoms up is around making sure that we've obviously got reliable, secure, nimble core platforms, right? So that, that comes to life in that I no longer have any data centers, right? We have no company data centers anymore. We've very successfully moved all of our legacy workloads that were in our own data centers up into the cloud, with AWS, and then we have one legacy platform still sitting in some co-location facilities, and that's next. So that's what I call sort of the bottoms up, and that has enabled us to certainly save money from having to operate very expensive legacy physical data centers that we owned, but also it's just given us a nimbleness. The other sort of what I would call bottoms up, or that part of modernization, is just having a secure and reliable set of platforms, right? So that manifests itself obviously in investments in cybersecurity, investments in reliability of platforms. So that's really all table stakes, and you have to lean into and out of that depending on the situation. But I'd say a lot of that core stuff is now behind us, which is great. The other piece is around modernization from the outside in, and this is where the consumer roadmaps and what we want to do to make rental experiences as digital and as easy as possible. Those roadmaps from the consumer side, and then also from the fleet side, how do we enable the most efficient use of our fleet? How do we make sure that we've got vehicles available in the places that our customers want and where they want to rent them? So those product roadmaps obviously drive the technology and the work that we need to fulfill those roadmaps. So that's really how we've approached modernization, is that sort of inside up and sort of outside in.
As you think about the various vectors you just described, bottom up, outside in, inside out, especially I guess the outside in, which would suggest collaborating and understanding the needs of consumers in addition to thinking about the implications of that on the operation. Can you talk a bit about the way in which you draw those insights, the partnerships you forge in order to do so?
Sure. So I think obviously, we use our own product. We use our competitors' products, right? I'm always using our own products. I always use our competitors' product. I never book car rental through our corporate travel management system, right? I book it on Expedia, or I book it on AAA, or I book it on Hertz.com, right? And I'll use our competitors' product. So, using the product is obviously a key insight for us. We obviously engage with customers. We engage with loyalty customers. That customer persona is different from somebody that is booking, once every year for the family vacation to Disney here in Florida, right? Very different personas, very different needs, right? The basics are still there, right? People want a clean, safe, reliable car that's available for them when they pick up, and that they can get on the road quickly and easily, right? That's universal regardless of who you are. So we obviously engage with customers to listen. And then we do a lot of testing, and that's the beauty of, I think, the ability with a lot of these technology platforms this day is, we will test different mechanisms as you're going through the shopping and booking flow, right? So for example, we changed just the images we use of cars, right? We used to have a sort of a quarter image of the car. And we said, no, people are renting cars. The car should be the star, and it should be the star of the show there when you're shopping and booking. So, we will play around with things like that to change things. We'll do the same with employees, right? We'll change things around in terms of the fleet platforms that they use, and really test and learn. So, we iterate towards the goal. I think the days of those multi-year, there's no such thing as the big reveal is one of the sayings that we used to have here a couple of years ago, right? The big reveal generally doesn't work, and the big reveal is often very disappointing, right? So to the extent that you can make things much more iterative, which I think we really have been doing, that's another way that this manifests itself, because you can get very quick feedback from your customers, from your employees, and then iterate from there.
You mentioned, understandably, that your company, along with your industry, and frankly, travel, leisure, hospitality, more generally speaking, was really adversely impacted by COVID. You were not with the company at the outset of that, but you joined was still in the throes and the recovery from it. Tim, I wonder, were there any silver linings to such an adverse situation? Of course, again, for the industry, so it wasn't as though your company was uniquely impacted by that. But it was such a major occurrence. I wonder to what extent it offered, a more of an impetus to change or rethink things as a result of that, among other potential silver linings associated with it.
I think that, one of the things that was that really happened during COVID was, it was very hard to buy a new car, right? As a consumer, it was almost impossible to buy a new car, and then used cars became, ridiculously expensive. So, for us as a very major fleet operator, I think that really taught us that, you may not be able to react to that sort of catastrophic situation. But we talk here about like buying right, holding right, and selling right with the fleet, right? Because if you get any of those three things wrong, it can have adverse financial implications for you, right? So, at our core, we buy hundreds of thousands of vehicles a year, and we sell hundreds of thousands of vehicles a year, and we rent, while we obviously hold them between those two periods. So I think COVID really sort of sharpened a lot of the thinking around the management of this fleet, right? And it's a significant, it's our biggest expense line. Depreciation for car rental companies is the number one expense. And if you don't manage the fleet efficiently, then there can obviously be ramifications from that. So I think COVID sort of taught us that. I think also there was this whole post-COVID travel boom that benefited airlines, hotels, car rental companies. Right, we all did extremely well coming out of COVID, and that I think forced us to be able to think about how do we serve those customers better. Because there was just so much demand there coming out of COVID, and so much demand, that could be helped with digital enablement rather than having to, do everything, the way that it's been done for so long. So I'd say, fleet management and then just that customer, having to serve that pent-up customer demand were a couple of the key things I think we learned coming out of that period.
Very interesting. You, like so many tech and digital leaders today, have invested in artificial intelligence. One of the things I found very interesting in one of our past conversations, Tim, was you mentioned you've chosen not to centralize control of artificial intelligence. And I wonder if you can describe the rationale and the benefits you've seen for not having done so.
Sure. My philosophy on AI has been around enable and protect. That's sort of the terminology that we use here. And by that, I mean, we should lead with enablement because the promise and the benefit of this is just immense for pretty much any company, right? We're no exception there. And, but then we back that up with the guardrails and the policies and so forth. So I think, when we started down this path, we actually started it more from a position of how do we constrain this and how do we make sure that it is used, correctly and appropriately, right? And that's all important. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't, the team, and we have a cross-functional AI at Hertz working group here that is representative of, like technology is actually the lesser attendees in terms of numbers on that group. But we said, look, we can't lead with this purely from don't do this, don't do that, be the AI police. So we've really tried to lead with enablement, and we've tried to foster thinking of this throughout the company so that it then gets brought up and it gets brought to this cross-functional group that can then assess and determine, does this make sense? Should we go? Do we have an existing AI platform that we could use? Do we need another one? So I've really tried to make it a very inclusive strategy because I think, anything that you sort of lead with from a position of sort of fear and constricting things, like it's not what we want to do here. So we've had some really great things that have bubbled up. So in our customer care organization, for example, we were really struggling with trying to get to the reasons that customers were calling, right? We had very crude metrics around they were calling to cancel or modify or change a reservation, or they were calling for emergency roadside assistance. Very, very sort of raw tagging that our customer care agents would attach to each of the interactions. So we loaded tens of thousands of call recordings into the Amazon Bedrock technology, right? And it within a matter of a couple of days, we mined more insights from those call recordings using AI than we ever would have done in months and months and months of people trying to do that. And that initiative was generated through the customer care organization, right? And then we ran it on an AWS product that we have. Another example in our fleet operations area, we have a lot of cars. We have to change a lot of tires every year, right? Like tread wear and all that sort of thing is really important for customer safety, right? We can't let you go out with one of our cars if the tire tread is too low. So this was historically a manual inspection process that we relied on to happen manually whenever any car was returned, right? Through some new technology from a company called UVI that does automated vehicle inspections, we're now able to take photographs of tires as they come into the lot and as they leave the lot. And the AI matching behind the scenes will figure out, is it time to generate a work order for that car to then go to maintenance and have new tires installed, right? So that bubbled up through our fleet organization, and we've now got that live at several US airports and rolling it out further this year. So just a couple of examples of sort of grassroots ground up, because me and my team, we're never going to be able to know everything that's going on in every little part of the business. So it needs to be something that we want everyone to think about. How could AI make my part of Hertz better?
Can you talk a little bit about the cross-functional team that has been assembled? You noted that technology is a lesser attendee, is the way you put it, among those. Who are the majority attendees that make up the rest of that team, please?
Well, we've really tried to represent all aspects of the company, right? So I have a one of my direct reports was the one that has championed in this and is really the chair of the committee. And we have someone from legal, I have someone from cyber, I have someone from fleet, someone from consumer, someone from marketing, someone from HR, someone from finance. I mean, it's every business unit in the company, because I'm of the view that there's AI that can be used anywhere. I mean, all of our presentations, we're not using stock photographs on things anymore, right? Like for my town halls and my presentations, we don't need to buy photographs anymore, right? For our app, right? Things that we would used to have, like we don't need to buy stock photos anymore. I mean, that can all be generated through AI. And the marketing team came to us, they had a particular product that they had seen and liked. And, we said, absolutely, you should go ahead. So it basically is representative of every business unit in the company is on the AI at Hertz group. And it's early days. We just set this up. They've been running now just on, I'd say, 3 months. We started it just towards the end of last year. And we did it because, things were popping up all over the company. And we said, hey, let's coordinate this amongst everyone as opposed to everyone going off in, a whole lot of different directions.
Fascinating. You mentioned a couple of use cases so far. I'd love to talk a little bit further about some others. You've mentioned to me in the past, one associated with revenue management and another associated with customer care. Would you mind sharing a few more details of some of the exciting innovations that are being driven by this?
Sure. Yeah, and maybe I'll mention this is all partnership. And often in technology, there's always this question of build or buy, and it's definitely the power of the and. It's definitely build and buy. We think partnerships with key technology providers are really key. We have an annual event. In fact, we just had it 2 weeks ago. We've had it 2 years now, where we bring together our top 20 partners into the headquarters here. And we basically give them information on the strategic focus of the company for the year. We have a panel with other members of the executive team. And, it's just a really good opportunity for us to share with partners about where the company's headed and where we think our focus areas are that technology could help enable. And that's a very, very valuable forum, right? I think we get great feedback from our partners, and it's a very curated group. We have far more than 20 partners, but these are the 20 key people. And we just started some awards this year as well. So we've actually started an annual set of awards for, best new partner, most innovative partner, best partnership. So that's great. So maybe I'll just touch on a couple of those partners that we're here. So we're doing a lot with Palantir, especially in our fleet area. We found the Foundry platform from Palantir to be very powerful and very fast to enable us to very quickly build prototypes of new fleet products, and just bring together very disparate data sets that are spread across multiple systems. So we've been using Palantir now for almost 3 years. It was one of the very first partnerships that I struck when I got here to the company. And we think there's significant additional benefit that we can drive from their platform. And again, we're primarily pointing at our fleet management area, and it's all about how do we turn that fleet more efficiently and make sure that it's available for rent, as much as possible. It's no different to the airline industry. A plane that sits at the gate too long is not earning revenue, right? You want planes in the sky and you want cars on rent. So very similar situation. So yeah, great partnership with Palantir. Really quite transformative for us. In the customer care area, we're actually, I can't name the partner, but we're using they're a relatively small, they're certainly beyond the startup phase, but they're not really what I would say is a household name. They're now powering about 40% of our customer chat interactions in the US on Hertz.com, are being powered by this next generation of AI-enabled chat agent. And it's been really fascinating. We just turned this on actually a couple of weeks ago. We've been working with them for a few months, but traditionally when you're deploying technology for chat, you've got to program it and give it intents, and you've got to make sure your knowledge base is like really, really tight so that it doesn't give crazy questions. But we were monitoring this very closely. We launched it with just like 1% of traffic for the first week or so. And it's working really well. There was a really interesting interaction with a customer and this chat agent around renting in winter. And the customer had asked whether we rented snow chains. We don't rent snow chains, but we do rent four-wheel drive cars and we do rent ski racks. So this agent very seamlessly and very nicely replied and said, I'm sorry, we don't rent snow chains, but if you're traveling to a mountain area with snow or a snowy area, we definitely rent all-wheel drive vehicles, and we definitely have ski racks available in some locations. It figured all that out by itself. Customer was extremely happy with the response, and so that's another area. I think using this next generation of generative AI for customer service is key. We've started with chat, and then voice will be the next channel. We're in the early stages of deploying that through our voice channel. People still want to call, right? I don't think that's ever going to go away, but we want to make it easier so that you're not fumbling through a press one for this, press two for that, and then getting to a live rep. A lot of the things that we're answering on that chat agent can also be answered quite easily, I think, in the voice channel. So there are a couple of things with partners that I think have been really quite exciting. And then I think you mentioned, or we've talked about, some work we're doing at Amadeus. They're a very, very large travel tech company, and we're working with them around revenue management and pricing, which is an extremely data intensive part of the business, and something that we want to make sure that, again, where customers want to rent cars at certain times of the year, let's make sure that we're reading those market signals through the sort of the shopping transaction flows to make sure that we have them positioned in the right place. So quite a early and very transformative partnership with Amadeus that we have just starting up.
Another great examples, actually, Tim. Thank you so much for sharing a bit more on the context, but also the partnerships that are bringing them to life. We've talked about a number of trends, and certainly AI being a prominent one in the recent part of our conversation. Are there other trends, Tim, as you look to the future that you would underscore as of consequence, in the medium or long term for the organization?
Look, I think so. Maybe let me touch on just sort of consumerization of technology, and then touch on something that people often ask us, which is around autonomous vehicles. So on the consumerization of technology, I think that's a given, right? I mean, we're all so exposed, and we're so used to things being so easy now through the power of smartphones that have brought that to our hands. So I think there's just this continued need to bring digitization to the customer experience, and making it as easy as possible it is for you to get on the road, right? If I think about when I fly now, I really don't have to interact with anyone until I actually get to the gate, and they just scan the boarding pass there. And it should be no different for car rental, right? We want to make that process as seamless and easy as possible, and that's a consumer product that we're continuing to iterate on, so that we can whether it's skipping the counter, which we've had for many years with the Hertz brand, but if you book directly on thrifty.com or you book directly on dollar.com, you also get a skip the counter experience now for those brands, right? So that you can easily get off the shuttle or get off the train at the airport and go straight to your car. The other thing I would mention is around autonomous. So I was traveling last week, and I've used Waymo a couple of times. I was in Phoenix for a couple of days, and I was with some other CIOs, and I said, "Who hasn't been in autonomous yet?" And actually, most people hadn't. So we took an autonomous vehicle to and from dinner. So these things are operating now in some of the major metros, and I think for us, given that fleet management and the operation of these large asset-heavy fleets is one of our core competencies, we think that's a real opportunity for us in the future as these autonomous fleets grow and develop. So that's something that we think we're quite well positioned for the future, to be able to manage an asset-heavy fleet of AVs.
Exciting. I look forward to tracking that progress and seeing it come through in the not too distant future. Thank you for sharing those anecdotes as well, Tim. I wanted to also ask you, is there anything you recently read, listened to, and/or watched that you'd recommend to your peers, Tim?
So I mentioned Palantir, and just for the record, I'm not. There's no paid promotion here, but Alex Karp, who's the CEO of Palantir, just released a new book a couple of weeks ago. I've just started. I'm only a chapter in, but it's called The Technological Republic, and it's Alex Karp's take on how technology should be used to basically improve society at a country level. And he's somewhat dismissive of apps that push coupons and what he sees as somewhat mindless uses of technology. I'm not sure that's ever going to change, but I think it's an interesting book so far, right? And I think it's a fresh take on the technology industry as it relates to the country and the patriotic use of technology, if you like, for the country. So, as I say, I'm a chapter in, but that would be something that I would, if people are looking for something to read, it's probably worth a look.
Well, thank you for that suggestion as well, Tim. And thank you for a great conversation beyond that as well. It's been exciting to hear more about your remarkable tenure at Hertz, consequential time in the company's history, some of the remarkable innovations that you and the team are ushering in, new modes of work and ways of thinking about technology and new operating models. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
No, it's been great. My pleasure, Peter. Good to talk.